Huffington. It's so wonderful to welcome you to Chicago.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you and all of you.
Yeah. So I want to start talking about sleep and asking you a simple question. One of the things I admire about you is that you have this really diverse background. You grew up in Greece, then you went to the United States, and you were educated at Cambridge and became the head of the famed Cambridge Union Debating Society, and wrote your first book there, but then you moved to the United States and went on to do all of that you've accomplished. So in thinking about sleep, you have a really interesting perspective on it, and I wanted to ask you, when it comes to sleep, what's the difference between Americans and Europeans in terms of how they sleep?
Well, there were more differences, but now actually we have all become part of the sleep deprivation epidemic. And the reason is our addiction to technology. It started getting bad during the first Industrial Revolution, when we started devaluing sleep because we thought we could treat human beings like machines. And the main goal with machines is to minimize downtime. But with the digital revolution, it's become really harder and harder for people to disconnect from their devices and reconnect with ourselves. And sleep is definitely a gateway to reconnecting with ourselves through our dreams, through the opportunity to let go of all our projects and recharge and start our day fresh. I mean, it's just an incredible invention by God or the higher power, whoever came up with it. But our assumption has been that somehow it was a waste, that it was like an evolutionary fault.
Right.
And now, the new science of sleep, it's very new. It's kind of amazing to realize in doing research for the book that the first scientific sleep center was founded at Stanford in 1970. And now there are over 2,500. So the universal consensus, in case you're wondering about how much sleep you need, is that unless you have a genetic mutation, about 1% of us have. So I'm sure there's somebody here, more than one somebody, who has that mutation, which means that you can have 4 or 5 hours and feel great and have no adverse effects. But unless you have that, the rest of us need 7 to 9 hours. What your number is within that spectrum is individual. Mine is 8. But when we get that, we approach our life dramatically different than when we don't.
When we don't. What do you remember of your childhood? Like, what sleep rituals did you have as a kid that you missed as you became an adult?
So my mother revered sleep. And my mother sounded, the way she talked to my sister and me, like a sleep scientist, but she was completely self-taught. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment when she separated from my father because she complained about his philandering, and he told her not to interfere in his private life.
Interesting concept.
It's very, don't try it at home, guys. So we lived in that 1-bedroom apartment, and she was adamant that if I was going to study later than my sister was going to go to sleep because she was younger, I had to study in the kitchen, and I had to be very quiet, not to disturb her sleep, because she kept saying to us that when you sleep, your grades will be better, which now has been proven by science, because we operate at peak performance. You'll be better at athletics, which again has been proven. We have more and more athletes who are prioritizing sleep in order to win. And also she said, you're not going to be cranky. We all have anecdotal evidence of that. And you're not going to catch colds. She really would say all those things. So she made us absolutely recognize that sleep was incredibly important. But then when I moved to New York, I was suddenly swimming in a culture which was dramatically different, which glamorized sleep deprivation, where people wore sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. I had dinner, in fact, recently with a guy who clearly did not know I had written a book on the sleep revolution, who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before. And I wanted to say, I didn't say, but I wanted to say, you know what? If you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. And you know, you go into workplaces and people congratulate employees for working 24/7, which is the cognitive equivalent of coming to work drunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you kind of fell prey to that as well, but are now fighting your way out of it, trying to get more sleep. But the thing that you, one of the things that you really, I mean, if there's a growing industry of sleep that's through all this science of sleep, you rail against the other sleep industry, which is all the pills that we take to try and make us go to sleep. So if sleeping pills are bad, and I think many people who've tried them know that they're not super effective, and alcohol's not good either, right? Because you wake up. Are there any like mood-altering substances you would recommend? You know?
Is this off the record?
What does Bill Maher say?
No, actually, first of all, let me just explain that I didn't just wake up one morning and saw the error of my ways.
Yeah.
I actually collapsed from sleep deprivation and burnout and hit my head on the way down and broke my cheekbone 9 years ago. So, I mean, right now, looking back at this moment in my life, I feel incredibly blessed that it happened. I really think I would either be dead now or have had a heart attack or something that's happening around us all the time. We just don't connect the dots easily, but you have executive after executive collapsing on their treadmill with a heart attack, dying, because what's happened in our culture is we have convinced people that exercising and nutrition are important, whether we do it or not. We know they're important.
We should do it.
Yes, but the third leg of the stool is sleep. And it's like you can be great at the other two. If you don't get enough sleep, you are damaging your health and you are damaging your performance at work in every aspect. But in terms of alternatives, there are so many. I have half the book is about ways to get enough sleep. But I want to urge everybody not to go to the second half of the book, which is how to get a good night's sleep, without reading the first half of the book, which is why you need a good night's sleep. And the reason for that is that I think we have to change our minds about sleep in a profound way before we can change our habits. But once you change your minds, I mean, it's just like rediscovering an incredible dimension of life. I mean, I sound like I'm in love with sleep, and I am in a way, because part of what happened to me is rekindling the romance of sleep. How do you get to the point of really looking forward to going to sleep instead of the way I lived most of my life, which is seeing sleep as a heavily mined border that I had to avoid crossing for as long as possible. And I mean, I spent so long like powering through, you know, these moments when you're beginning to feel tired and you feel, no, I have to answer 20 more emails or finish another project, which I could perfectly well do in the morning. I'm not talking about times when you have a real deadline. I'm talking about times when you could just as easily do it in the morning. Right. And now, 95% of the time I get 8 hours sleep, even on book tour.
Even on book tour, that's impressive. You should have like a special tutorial for authors on book tour.
Yeah, happy to. It means not doing certain things. Like last night, a friend of mine gave me a book party. I would have loved to go have dinner with her afterwards, but I didn't. Yeah. I went to sleep because here's the thing. It's not even a choice anymore, because waking up fully recharged and really bringing joy and presence into my day is such a magnet that draws me that there's no competition with something else I might want to do. And it also means not watching certain shows, even though you may want to, because everybody has more discretionary time than we think.
If I hadn't binge watched The L Word, I wouldn't have seen your fabulous performance during it.
Maga, did you binge watch it recently?
Yeah,
or a long time
it's back
ago?
on Netflix. So,
oh my God, amazing.
I do want to,
it was so long ago. How was my hair? Very short at the time.
Very good, you were fun, you were very funny. I do want to ask you though, you were talking about that earlier, there was really the Industrial Revolution. Like we haven't always valued our lack of sleep or thought of sleep as a waste. It was sort of the Industrial Revolution that kind of robbed us of it. And now, so then sleeping was sort of the enemy of peak performance. But now a lack of sleep is the enemy of peak performance in the 21st century, or at least we're starting to realize this. But I mean, is it sleep that's the problem, or is it work that's the problem? Do we need a revolution in work? I mean, are we just working too much or feeling that sense of we must work all the time?
Well, I think that the problem is that we endlessly prolong work. Work never stops now because work is on our smartphones, so it follows us everywhere. It follows us into our bedrooms. And that's why I say that of all the different tips and techniques and micro steps that I have in the book, the most important is to pick a time before you're going to turn off the light, turn off all your devices, and gently escort them out of the bedroom. This is kind of the non-negotiable step we need to take. And I find that now it's become easier and easier to do it. I do it now 30 minutes before I go to sleep, but I used to do it 5 minutes before I go to sleep. And anybody here who's a parent, you're a parent, there are many people here who are parents, know that when our children are babies or very young, we don't just drop them in their beds. We have a whole ritual of giving them a bath and putting them in their PJs and singing them a lullaby. Well, we need a ritual too. And the ritual is what allows us to wind down and to slow down our brains. And if we don't do that, we are going to wake up in the middle of the night and our brains will keep processing all the incomplete business of the day and the projects we have to do next day and all our anxieties, etc. So you're going to hear my ritual? You have to create your own ritual from all the stuff I have in the book, but my ritual is turning off my devices, having a hot bath with Epsom salts and flickering candles. Don't worry about how hokey your ritual is. It's your ritual. You don't have to share it with hundreds of people as I'm doing here tonight. And if you don't like baths, have a hot shower. The point is having water that it's almost like washes away the day. And it's like a clear demarcation line between the day and the night. Right. And I love, I was reading about samurai culture, and I have that in the book. I love the fact that when samurais enter a tea house, they always leave their swords outside. Right. In a sense, our swords are smartphones. So we have to leave them outside because this is sacred space. Right.
I want to ask you about that because
I didn't finish my ritual.
Oh, I thought you were done. Oh. What comes next?
So after that,
that's a long ritual.
So after that, I have dedicated sleep clothes, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is because I used to sleep in my gym clothes. I used to sleep in the same clothes I would work out in, not literally the ones I wore that day. And my brain would get these confusing signals, like, are we going to bed or are we going to the gym? Now I have beautiful lingerie, which normally women only get when they're at the beginning of a love affair. Which is kind of a shame, because...
Wear it for yourself, ladies.
Just do it for yourself. Yeah. And if you don't like beautiful lingerie, just wear a T-shirt that you don't wear to the gym. It doesn't matter. And then when I get into bed, I only read real books, physical books. Nothing with screens and blue light and anything that stimulates the brain. And I only read books that have nothing to do with work. Poetry, philosophy, novels. And I have to tell you that if you read The Sleep Revolution in bed, I will consider it a personal victory if it puts you to sleep.
I read it in bed.
You did? Did it put you to sleep?
Yeah, I love reading to sleep. But okay, so the bedroom has to be a sacred place and we should kind of cut it off from the rest of the world. And I was thinking about that, and I have in fact started following some of your advice. I'm leaving my phone in the kitchen. I'm not bringing my laptop in. But I recall a moment when you invited the entire world into your bedroom with Strange Bedfellows, when you and Al Franken, did anyone see this on Politically Incorrect? It was a great segment.
1996.
Yeah. You two would get in bed, it was brilliant, two very smart political commentators would climb into bed wearing pajamas.
Actually, very beautiful lingerie.
Yeah, you had a beautiful black lace.
Which I must be the only woman here who got a tax deduction for lingerie because I wore it on a show. I still have them because we did a performance every night during the Democratic Convention here in Chicago.
Right.
And during the Republican Convention in San Diego, so that was 8 nights, and then we did one on election night in New York. So I have 9 sets of lingerie paid for by Comedy Central.
Nobody else can claim that. But it was great, because you two would sort of almost be like two spouses in bed before going to sleep, sort of bicker about politics, and there were pillow fights, and sometimes you'd kiss and make up. You know, but it was...
Now he's a senator,
yeah.
and I'm writing a book about sleep. Who would have known?
Well, and a media mogul, yeah. But it just struck me that that has been a part of what you do and the way that you've kind of changed the media landscape. You know, that was in a way the beginning of some of the politics as entertainment or politics as reality show, that whole kind of approach Comedy Central took, because it was such a crazy election. I mean, we had Ross Perot, we had Bob Dole, people were like really kind of losing it, what was going to happen. How do you compare 96 to, you know, although these many years, 2016, and we were sort of having similar sorts of like, what is going on?
Oh, I don't think it's similar at all, actually.
No?
I think 96 compared to 2016 seems like the pinnacle of civilization. I mean, this is an unprecedented election in the sense that we've never had a candidate running for president who regularly incited violence at his political rallies, who called on people to be taken out on a stretcher. We've never had a candidate who has called for the banning of an entire religion, 1.6 billion Muslims from entering the country. And we've never had a candidate who still believed something as outlandish as the President of the United States was not born in this country. So leaving aside all our differences politically with all the different candidates, this is a different level of insanity. And actually one thing that is fascinating is that Donald Trump regularly, in case you were wondering who I was talking about, regularly brags that he only gets 4 to 4.5 hours sleep. And he displays all the symptoms of chronic sleep deprivation, inability to process even simple information, mood swings, anger outbursts, repetition of incomprehensible pablum, instability, and false memories. Remember all those thousands of Muslims who supposedly celebrated the fall of the Twin Towers, except nobody can remember it or see it or find it. So I think actually that when I hope at some point he exits our public life, the good thing that he will have brought to us is that parents can use him as a cautionary tale for their children. And say, you know what, if you don't go to sleep, you're going to end up like Donald Trump.
Which of the current candidates do you think is sleeping soundly?
So, you know, that is actually a very interesting point. I think that our politicians and the whole political consulting class would be much better off if they got enough sleep. And right now, I mean, I have actually a whole section on politics and sleep in the book, because Bill Clinton famously would not get enough sleep because he had heard somewhere at school that great men don't need a lot of sleep. And actually, last night when I landed in Chicago, I had a call, and he told me I can share it, so I'm not disclosing anything, from Senator Harry Reid. And I actually thought that because it had just been announced yesterday that I joined the board of Uber, and Uber is having some problems in Nevada, I thought he was calling me about that. But no, he was calling me to say that he had just read The Sleep Revolution. And it had changed the way he approached sleep, and he had given it to his staff, because he said when he was a young man, it was actually a very moving call. When he was a young man, he had read about Thomas Edison, who is included in the book, it was this amazing figure who invented the light bulb and changed our lives, but he was completely wrong about sleep. He thought that sleep would be eliminated, and that it was an absurdity, and it was unproductive. And he thought, well, if Thomas Edison, this great man, says sleep is all those things, I should just cut down on sleep. And now he's changed that, and he talks about how his life changed. So I think a lot of politicians would be so much better if they actually operate at full capacity. And if you think of it, as Professor Ronenberg, the great German sleep scientist, says in the book, we are now, in terms of sleep deprivation, where we were in terms of smoking. Remember, we used to think that smoking was okay. I know it's kind of unbelievable now, but we had doctors advertising a particular brand of cigarettes, saying, you know, I smoke menthols because they refresh my throat, in white coats on television. Now, you would never see a political figure smoke in public. They may smoke in private, they would never smoke in public.
Right.
Yet, in terms of the public interest, a politician making decisions when he or she is sleep deprived is infinitely worse than a politician making decisions when they're smoking. I mean, it's terrible for their health, but I'm talking in terms of decision making. So we need to get to the point where no politician would brag about not getting enough sleep. Ted Cruz sent out a fundraising letter 4 days ago saying, I'm sacrificing sleep and my health for the public. Why is it good for us to have a sleep-deprived, sick politician? I don't really get it.
You know, but you do talk in the remedies and how do you change the culture, right? Which is sort of what happened with smoking. And it is interesting how you can change behaviors, at least like those kind of behaviors, better than or quicker than people's political positions, probably, right? But how do you change it? You wrote in the book that, you know, we're likely or ideally we're not going to enforce these changes via law. They'll happen as corporate culture evolves. But since it's in corporate interests for us to not sleep, you know, to work all the time, will we actually see some of these changes where politicians will say, yeah, let's get 8 hours of sleep?
I mean, in terms of the corporate culture, it's already happening. It's actually an amazing transition that we're living through right now. And I mean, let me just give you the latest example. I mean, I have a lot of examples in the book, but the latest is so amazing. Unfortunately, it happened after the book went to press, but Mark Bertolini, the CEO of Aetna, 49,000 employees, they bought Humanities, so it's going to be even bigger, has given employees Fitbits to track their sleep, and those who get 7 hours or more every night receive $25 a night. Now, this is amazing. This is a corporate leader basically sending the message that when you sleep, it's better for my bottom line because our healthcare costs go down. That's his message. And your productivity goes up. So the science is in. Employees who go to work sleep deprived are not as good. They're not as engaged. They bring maybe 60% or 40% of themselves to work. They get sick more often, which means they're going to take time off, or they're going to increase the costs to the employer. So there's no question. It's just a matter of how quickly will the culture change. And I have all the other examples in the book of hotels. The hotel industry now is competing with each other which hotel chain is going to offer the best sleep experience. We've partnered with Marriott, and if you stayed in a Marriott hotel recently, you will receive on your pillow, in over 3,000 hotels, a card with my 8 top sleep tips. And it's kind of amazing. I get friends sending me pictures from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the Pittsburgh Airport Hotel, and they want to be identified with sleep.
Do you think, I mean, it was the labor movement, right, that brought us the 8-hour day and sort of maybe some sort of reasonableness to how much you should work and how much you should sleep, how much time you should have, and you write about that in the book. Do you think the question of sleep and are we getting enough and how do we get more is something that all people working have access to? Do you know what I mean? Is this like more where I started? Is it an American kind of phenomenon? Is it a first world thing? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, no,
or does everyone have even the capacity to say, like, sleep is a right and I don't have labor laws that protect me so I can sleep?
It's a universal problem. I mean, in Japan and in China, there are specific words for dying from overwork.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are waking up to that. I had a conversation like we're having now with Sylvia Barwell, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, on Monday in Washington in front of her staff. And she was amazing. She talked about how she sleeps for 7 hours. She's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, except, she said, during the Ebola crisis, which is always going to happen in our lives. There will be a crisis when sleep will have
all
to go.
bets are off.
Yeah,
All
but
hands on deck.
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
Right.
talking about what do we do on a regular basis. So if the crisis happens, we're not running on fumes. And over the weekend, she gets 8 hours. And she has the rule with her staff that they are not, as they call it in Washington, they don't need to hatch their BlackBerries. What does that mean? Wherever you are, you have your BlackBerry right here somewhere in case your boss tries to get in touch with you and you surreptitiously look at it, whether you're having dinner with your lover or your children. That's not a way to live. And she said she has told the White House that if they need her, they need to call her. She's not going to be checking her BlackBerry. Now, that's leadership. And that's changing the culture for everybody. And that's happening. I can give you 100 examples from different worlds, from the airline industry to politicians in Washington to college students. We are taking sleep first to 120 colleges. We had a great one at the University of Chicago. Really amazing today to see all the students coming up who have free things to entice them, like free pajamas and white noise machines and eye masks and ways to remodel their dorm rooms. And I'm so excited about that because I have 2 daughters who just graduated from college. And it was so clear to me that sleep deprivation is at the heart of a lot of the mental health issues in college. You know, depression, anxiety, suicides even. And if we can increase the awareness of the importance of sleep, it will begin to change so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're trying to revolutionize sleep. You definitely revolutionized the media. You know, we talk about the 24/7 news cycle, and I'm sure when people can't sleep at night, there's traffic to your website, right? People go to Huffington Post if they haven't left their devices behind.
I'm ready to sacrifice every bit of traffic to the Huffington Post website at night.
Just turn it off.
For people to get a good night's sleep.
But just it speaks to sort of what CNN did for broadcast, you did for the internet, you know, and the kind of power you have through HuffPost and the kind of position you have looking at the world. And I wonder how you think about, like, what, we're 11 years into Huffington Post, what you think the contribution has been, what contribution you've made to the media landscape, to the political landscape.
I think we've definitely democratized conversations because as well as being a journalistic enterprise that has won a Pulitzer with 850 journalists, editors, reporters now in 15 countries, we are a platform. And on that platform, you're all invited to contribute. And you can have people who are presidents of countries and corporations next to homeless students who have something interesting to say. And that actually happened. And Harvard read the post of that student, has offered him a place at Harvard, and he's now in his third year there. So it's kind of the magic of the platform. And I love that. I think that's been definitely one of our contributions. And the other has been our prioritizing two other editorial initiatives. One is wellness. We have an enormous amount around stress reduction, health, wellness, sleep. We launched a dedicated sleep section in 2007. And we also have an entire section dedicated to solutions, because we feel journalism is so driven by covering crisis, and that's obviously important. We are going to do that. But we also need to cover what is working. In fact, that's the name of that editorial bucket.
Right, what is working, yeah. What would you say to the media in terms of their coverage of this election campaign?
Oh, I think it's been a real black mark on the media. And I think there's been a real dereliction of duty. They have surrendered to the ratings bonanza that Donald Trump is, and they have not covered him as the danger that he is. And you have Bob Woodward doing a 90-minute interview with him and not asking these three key questions about his espousing violence, his wanting to ban Muslims, and his birtherism. So that's been one of the problems.
Do you ever think about going into politics? I mean, you ran a campaign.
No, I would never run.
No. Never again?
No. I love my multiple day jobs. and I think it's great for life to go through stages. You've had different stages in your life, and I love that. In fact, we just launched a new video series at the Huffington Post called Jump, about people who jump from one career to another. And we also launched another series, which I would love you all to participate in, called Talk to Me, which is children interviewing their parents. And it's been amazing. We had, my daughter Christina is producing it, and obviously she interviewed me, but we had Sam Branson interviewing Richard, and Barbara Bush interviewing Laura, and Alex interviewing Mike Bloomberg, and it's been just an amazing way of reconnecting parents and children, and we open it up to everybody. So Mother's Day is coming up. We'd love you to do it. Just you can go to the HuffPost Talk to Me section, or you can email me. I'm going to give you my email address. It's Arianna@huffingtonpost.com.
Well, let's bring the audience in and see what they have to say. We'll take some questions. There we go. There you are.
That's so much better.
Yes, as a very enthusiastic napper, I wanted to get your thoughts on napping during the day.
Napping is great. Winston Churchill called them power naps, and he won the Second World War. So napping is a real reset button for the day.
What inspired you to become a people's journalist? I consider you as a people's journalist.
Thank you. I've been primarily a book writer. Sleep is my 15th book. I decided to launch the Huffington Post and run a journalistic enterprise because I love conversations, and I wanted very much to have a great conversation happening online, as the technology was making that possible for everybody. That's been my greatest joy, and I love the fact that people can go somewhere and both get the latest stories and the latest information, but also have themselves heard.
What's the power of conversation for you? Why is it so powerful?
I think it helps us get deeper with each other and with ourselves. And in fact, there's a great book called Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle, where she talks about the dangers of technology getting in the way of conversation. And I think, it's, again, that's another important reminder. You know, technology is important, but we've got to put it in its place. Right now, we take better care of our smartphones than we take care of ourselves. I think everybody here probably knows approximately how much battery remains on your smartphone. But if you had asked me on the day that I collapsed, how are you, Arianna, I would have said fine. Because I had really forgotten what it's like to operate on 100% battery. And it's such an amazing, wonderful feeling. And we owe it to ourselves. It's like, I suppose what I'm trying to do is give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, to do what they say on airplanes, you know, put your own oxygen mask first. And then everything will be easier and better, and there'll be more joy into what we're doing, which I think is also incredibly important. It's not enough to just get things done.
We have a question back here.
Hi. So I'm here with two of my friends, and we just submitted a project on for the Bright Schools sleep competition, and we're here to hear you talk about sleep. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Can you write about your project for the Huffington Post?
I don't know.
Perfect.
Yes, definitely. Sure. So we did the focus of our project was biphasic sleep, and we were wondering if you had, if you were aware of that, and if you had any opinions on that.
Oh, the two-phase. Oh, yes. Well, you know, segmented sleep, as it has been known throughout history, is very, very common historically, especially before the invention of the light bulb. And I would say probably the majority of people here, I mean, we can take a show of hands. Do you wake up at least once during the night? No problem at all about that. There's no stress. People stress when they wake up. The only thing that becomes stressful is if you go to your smartphone when you wake up. Because then what happens is that you allow your day life to invade your recharging nighttime. If you don't go to your phone, you can have a lot of other things to do, which actually are recharging, and they are a continuation of recharging. I mean, for example, I meditate, so I prop myself up with my pillows and I meditate. If you don't meditate, I have an appendix in the book with 12 of my favorite meditations. And I promise you one thing, there will be at least one in the bunch that you will never hear to the end because it will put you to sleep. My sister and I have also done a meditation which is in the book and which she has recorded, and she sounds exactly like me. And if you go to the book website, ariannahuffington.com, you can download it not on your smartphone, on a dedicated iPod. Because why? Because you are not going to be having your smartphone by your bed anymore. And it will put you to sleep. And also you can read books that have nothing to do with work during that time. And very soon you're going to go back to sleep. But just don't stress. They actually quoted a scientific study in the book where they had two groups. And one group, the control group, was stressing about being awake at night and counting the hours and saying, I'm going to wake up exhausted in the morning. The other group was told their job was to stay awake. That group fell asleep faster.
I think people also need to have the right to hold others accountable for not getting enough sleep. Recently, we had a relative of ours who was in the hospital for a procedure, and the intern came in to perform the procedure, and she asked him, how many hours have you been up? And he said 24, and she said, get somebody else, I won't do it. And I think that that's also part of the message that you have to present.
Absolutely. That is such a good point, and so great of her that she did that. Can you ask her to write about it on HuffPost? No, seriously, because that's a question we should be asking. We should be asking it also of our pilots, of our train drivers. What happens is that there is this huge shift happening now in the medical profession that has had these ridiculous hours for residents and others. And now that's changing because we have such a long list of adverse medical effects, as they call them, because of the sleep deprivation of medical professionals. I have so many examples like that in the book, in the hospital section. The one that was so heartbreaking is the nurse who fell asleep holding a baby and dropped the baby, and the baby has lifelong brain injury. So you're right, we have to hold those who are supposed to take care of us accountable for showing up fully recharged. They owe it to us, and there should be no excuse for that.
I would like to know if in your studying of sleep, you find differences between men and women, between urban versus rural. What are the demographic differences, if you can speak just a little bit to that, if there are any socioeconomic differences that you were able to uncover?
Great question. So on the socioeconomic front, I recently had a clinic in a church in Harlem for people who are struggling to put food on the table, many of them holding down 2 and 3 jobs, and it was heartbreaking because there was such little awareness about the importance of sleep that, just to give you one story that sums it up, one woman in her 30s was telling me how she was a pastry chef and a babysitter. She would come home from work and she said, "This is my time to watch my shows." And she would watch television for 4 hours. Then she would fall asleep, and at some point the television would wake her up, and then she would not be able to go back to sleep because, she had not done that winding down, slowing down of the brain ritual. So she would go to the kitchen to get something sweet, because when you're sleep deprived, you crave sweets and sugars, and carbs. So she was really overweight with diabetes, just in her 30s. And on top of it, she was judging herself because she said, if I was like one of those high-flying Wall Street types, I would be able to do it on 4 hours sleep. So there's a lot that we need to do for people who don't have a minimum wage that's a living wage, who don't have viable jobs, but at least sleep is free and available and can change both health outcomes and resilience. It's not an alternative to policy changes, but it is something that we can do right now. And women just suffer more when they're sleep deprived. We get more depressed, we get more angry, and we process stress differently. And because stress and sleep deprivation are so connected, it has also even worse effects on diabetes and heart disease. But we need to end on an optimistic note.
Yes. Let's have a quick little thought, because one of the things that you promise in your book is that, so sleep to work better, the science of sleep, but there's also the mystery of sleep. And all through the book, you have these beautiful quotes from poets and writers sort of saying, there's more to sleep than we really know. So for you, what's the mystery of sleep? What would you leave us with?
For me, the mystery of sleep is that we are more than our jobs. That however magnificent our jobs may be, who we are is so much bigger. And sleep is a gateway to us reconnecting with that reality. And our resistance to sleep also is as a result of our attachment to just this earthly bound existence. And there is more. And so I feel, leaving aside the performance advantages and the health advantages, the mystery advantages are also amazing. So I have this line in the book that might be a good line to end with, which is, come for the job-enhancing benefits, stay for the life-enhancing benefits. Thank you.
Thank you.